Okay. So, who would like to volunteer to read today?
Shall I read, Prabhu?
Yeah, your voice is okay this time.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Prabhu. Okay, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Arikshan. During his stay in Seattle, a few people came to join his disciples, living with them and aspiring to become devotees. After several weeks, Prabhupada held an initiation for students who had already been with ISKCON for about 6 months. Prabhupada held the traditional initiation ceremony with mantras and fire yajna in the temple room. He had just completed the last mantra and turned to the devotees and said, "Now chant Hare Krishna." When a guest, a woman who had some local fame as a Hatha Yoga instructor, interrupted the proceedings. "Excuse me," she began. "I have to speak to you." "Please wait," said Prabhupada. "Why are you sitting on a raised seat?" she exclaimed. "You are sitting up there, and all these people are sitting here, and you are like you are on a throne." Devotees tried politely to check her, but she wanted to be heard. Prabhupada was silent. "Why does everyone bow to you?" she demanded. "Don't you know God is everywhere? Everyone is God." "That's all right," said Prabhupada. "Let's chant." Her argument was drowned out by a rousing kirtana celebrating the completion of the initiation ceremony. When the kirtana ended, Prabhupada was still thinking of the disruptive guest. "Prabhupada, where is that girl? She's gone?" "Vishnu Jana. I think Madhudisha explained to her. She didn't know about the bowing down and everything." "Prabhupada, what was her question?" "Vishnu Jana. She was thinking that we were bowing down to you as if you were God. She resents this because in the Christian religion it says, 'Bow down to no man.'" "What did you explain?" Prabhupada laughed. "Did you not explain that we are bowing down not as God but as God's representative? Could you not explain like this?" "She is over there, I think," said Madhudvisha. "If you'd like to talk to her." But the yogini had left the room and was now out front talking with the new girl, Joy, who had been living with Prabhupada's disciples since his first night in Seattle. The yogini was trying to revive Joy's old interest in impersonal yoga and was criticizing Prabhupada. Although Joy had cried when Prabhupada was blasphemed, she became confused hearing the yogini speak impersonal, anti devotional philosophy. Then, as Prabhupada was leaving the temple to get into his car, the yogini obstructed his path and continued her blasphemy. "No one should bow down," she railed, "because everyone is God." Prabhupada became angry, a fiery look in his wide eyes. Suddenly, Joy Falcho came forward and threw herself on the ground before Prabhupada, placing her hand on his foot. She had been confused about whom to accept, but now felt compelled to surrender to Prabhupada. He allowed her to keep her hand on his foot while the yogini gradually subsided before Prabhupada's angry silence and let him pass. Getting into the van, Prabhupada bumped his head on the inside of the roof. The devotees were furious and blamed the blasphemous girl for what happened. As the van drove away, Prabhupada turned to Naranarayana, who was driving. "That girl said everyone is God, but she objected that they were bowing down to me. But if everyone is God, am I not also God?" The devotees in Seattle were trying to save Joy, who had become confused by the visit of the yogini. The next day, they arranged that she should go see Prabhupada on the plea that she was an artist and could perhaps do some devotional paintings. Prabhupada agreed, and she waited outside his room while he gave a Jivananda drum lesson. Finally, she entered Prabhupada's room. Janavadasi, joyful culture. Prabhupada asked, "What kind of girl is it who sees every man as God?" He was referring to the troublesome girl who had blasphemed at the initiation. I didn't understand him, so he repeated the question, then a third time, and added, "She is a prostitute, isn't she?" Fortunately, Govindadasi walked in at that moment and was able to tell me later what his question had been. At the time, all I knew was that I accepted his divine grace as spiritual master and that the answer to his question, no matter what it was yes. So I answered yes, Srila Prabhupada, and he was pleased. Then he warned, "Don't associate with non devotees." I wanted him to know that I accepted him without doubt as my spiritual master. Very sentimentally, I said, "Srila Prabhupada, I have always had trouble with my material father and mother, but now I can understand that you are my real father." His divine grace mercifully matched my tone and gently said, "Everyone has a material father and mother, but you have a spiritual father. You are very fortunate." I was crazy and had trouble seeing him because he appeared very effulgent. So I was wiping my eyes with my hands. Also, I couldn't understand his accent. So I kept wiping my ears with my hands. His divine grace took compassion on my struggle to be Krishna conscious. He then penetrated my impersonalism with a beautiful description of Lord Krishna's form. As I sat facing him, he was looking past me over my shoulder. His divine grace said, "Just see how beautifully Lord Krishna's hair is resting on his shoulders. Just see how his eyes are beautiful, like two lotus petals. Just see how nicely Lord Krishna has wrapped his shawl about his thighs. Just see how nicely he has put on his dhoti." He also mentioned the Lord's lotus feet. I don't know whether he was looking at a deity or a picture of Krishna or whether Lord Krishna was standing there. As he looked up and down, describing his form, all I knew was that if I turned around, I would see a painting of brass or air. So I decided just to look at his divine grace and hear him describe Lord Krishna as he saw him. After I left the room, Govindadasi asked what His Divine Grace had said about painting. She couldn't believe it when I told her we didn't discuss painting for the whole hour. Knowing that the spiritual master knows everything, I had waited for him to bring up the subject and give me that service. She brought me back and explained to him the purpose for which I had come. He asked my artistic background and was unimpressed when I rattled it off because I was proud. Then he ordered me to paint the Panchatattva. Not only new recruits but older devotees were being drawn closer to Prabhupada by the mercy of Krishna. In the Sanskrit scriptures, the word Upaniti means coming closer to the spiritual master for the purpose of receiving more confidential instructions in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada also took the opportunity of any meeting with his disciples to try to bring them closer to the Lord, Naranarayana. One of the most deeply impressive things that happened to me was the very first time I sat alone with Srila Prabhupada. I had been with Srila Prabhupada in San Francisco before in his room, but there were other people there, and I was a newcomer. But then I sat alone with Srila Prabhupada, and I was terribly fearful because I didn't know what to do, what to say. I was a little spaced out from all my karmic activities and was totally tense, like I was going to explode like a jack in the box because I didn't know what to do. I watched Srila Prabhupada opening letters. He opened the envelope all the way out and saved it and used it later to write on in order to save paper. He showed me some letter from somewhere and asked my opinion. Then he asked me to get something from his cabinet, and I did. His room was surrounded by windows with the light shining in from a very nice angle because of the way it was a little subterranean. The table was very low, just like a coffee table, and he was sitting behind it. I happened to be in the back against the wall, and he asked me to get something from one of his cabinets, which was also behind there. So he and I both ended up behind his low table. He was standing and I was crouching. When I stood up, Srila Prabhupada, out of the blue, began to talk to me. I was just so flabbergasted. Anytime he spoke to me, I became so disconcerted that I could hardly hear what he was saying. He pointed out to the table. He said, "You see this little ant?" I looked at the table and no ant was there. Prabhupada was pointing his finger. He said, "Do you see that little ant?" I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." He said, "We shouldn't think that our goal should be how to make this ant Krishna conscious." I was just sort of blown away by what he said. He said, "We should go to this ant and we should lean down." And Prabhupada leaned down to the invisible ant on the table where he propped his forefinger and thumb together, poking toward the ant. "You should chant Hare Krishna." And he said, "We should give a little prasadam. If we do that," he said, "our whole movement will be a success." I was completely impressed by the statement because I understood even though Srila Prabhupada always had big schemes for a big world ISKCON, yet his heart was always lined with these small items, and this was so wonderful. If one person hears Hare Krishna, then it is worth the whole effort. Love for Srila Prabhupada was also brought out by the prospect of separation from him. Govinda Dasi and her husband had been Prabhupada's secretaries for a year. They had been with him wherever he went, from the West Coast to Boston to Montreal to Santa Fe. They were always with him, like a part of his intimate family, and they had become very attached to being with him. But in his desire to spread Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada sent Govindadas's husband Gaurasundara to Hawaii before coming to Seattle to open an ISKCON center there. In Seattle, Prabhupada asked Govindadasi to join her husband, Govindadasi. If Prabhupada said, "Very nice, your life was perfect," whether he said it for your cooking chapatis or peanuts or doing a drawing or a kirtana or anything. If he said very nice and smiled and nodded his head, then your life's ambition was achieved. For that moment, anyway. Getting him to smile, seeing him happy was the goal of life, and you didn't really remember things like liberation. It was almost as if the idea of going to a heavenly planet or even Krishnaloka became distant. But at this time, I knew that I was going to have to leave Srila Prabhupada soon. I was so very, very attached to him that I would wake up in the middle of the night crying. Almost every night, I would invariably be crying in my dreams or in my sleep because of having to leave him soon, and I did want to. It was a very painful time. On one of his last evenings in Seattle, Prabhupada gave a lecture at the temple as usual, and then he returned to his apartment. The devotees at the temple took hot milk and prepared themselves to rest. But suddenly Prabhupada re-entered the temple. It was very unusual. They offered obeisances and waited in keen anticipation. His mood was very grave. He again sat on the Vyasasana and asked them to sit. He had his servant adjust the tape recorder and play a tape of Prabhupada singing and playing the harmonium. Puzzled, the devotees looked at each other. For about 30 minutes, a beautiful bhajana of Prabhupada singing the Vandeham prayers played in the room before the assembled devotees. Afterwards, Prabhupada said, I have just received one telegram from India. The person who gave me sannyasa has left his body. Prabhupada continued to explain. One has to accept the renounced order of life from another person who is in the renounced order. He said, I never thought that I shall accept the renounced order of life in my family life. When I was in the midst of my wife and children, sometimes I was dreaming that my spiritual master was calling me and I was following him. When my dream was over, I was thinking I was a little horrified. Oh, Guru Maharaja wants me to become sannyasi. How can I accept sannyasa? At that time, I was feeling not very much satisfaction that I have to give up my family and become a mendicant. At that time, it was a horrible thing. Sometimes I was thinking, no, I cannot take sannyasa. But again, I saw the same dream. So in this way, I was fortunate. My Guru Maharaja, here Prabhupada's voice choked and he became overwhelmed with emotion. He pulled me out from this material life. For a moment, Prabhupada could not speak. Everyone present saw tears pour from his eyes, and then he spoke further. Although the occasion was the passing away of the person who awarded him sannyasa, Prabhupada was speaking more of how his own spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, had called him and saved him and made him take sannyasa through his sannyasa guru. I have not lost anything, Prabhupada said. He was so kind upon me. I have gained. I left 3 children. I have now got 300 children. So I am not loser. This is material conception. We think that we shall be loser by accepting Krishna. Nobody is loser. I say from my practical experience. I was thinking that how can I accept this renounced order of life? I cannot accept so much trouble. But I retired from my family life. I was sitting alone in Vrindavana, writing books. So this, my god brother, he insisted me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, this title was given in my family life. It was offered to me by the Vaishnava society. So he insisted, not he insisted, practically my spiritual master insisted me through him that you accept because without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he wanted me to become a preacher. So he forced me through this God brother. you accept. So unwillingly, I accepted. And then I remembered that he wanted me to go to the Western country. So I am feeling now very obliged to my this God brother that he carried out the wish of my spiritual master and forced me to accept the sannyasa order. So this God brother, His Holiness Keshava Maharaja, is no more. He had entered Krishna's abode. So I wish to pass a resolution of bereavement and send that. And I have composed one verse also in this connection in Sanskrit. So you all present, you sign this. I shall send it tomorrow. The verse I have composed, it is in Sanskrit. Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga. This Krishna consciousness is Vairagya Vidya. Vairagya Vidya means to become de- detestful to this material world. This is called Vairagya Vidya, and that is possible simply by this Bhakti Yoga. Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yogam apa, Apayayam Mam. This is just like medicine. The child is afraid of taking medicine. That also I have experienced. In my childhood, when I became ill, I was very stubborn. I won't accept any medicine. So my mother used to force medicine within my mouth with a spoon. I was so obstinate. So anyway, similarly, I did not want to accept the sannyasa order, but this god brother forced me. You must. Ap- Apaya yam. He forcefully made me to drink this medicine. Anavishyum andham. Why I was unwilling. Anavishyum means unwilling. Andham means one who is blind, who cannot see his future. This spiritual life is the brightest future, but the materialist cannot see to it. But the Vaishnavas, the spiritual master, they forcefully, you drink this medicine. You see, apayayam mam anavishyum andham Shri Keshava Bhakti Prajnanam. So this my god brother, his name is Keshava, Bhakti Prajna Keshava, Kripamu, Kripambuddhi. So he did this favor upon me because he was an ocean of mercy. So we offer our obeisances to Vaishnava Kripambuddhi. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya Evacha. The Vaishnavas, the representatives of the Lord, they are so kind. They bring the ocean of mercy for distributing to the suffering humanity. Kripambhuti yastam aham prapadye. So I am offering my respectful obeisances unto this His Holiness because he forcibly made me adopt the sannyasa order. So he is no more in this world. He has entered Krishna's abode. So I am offering my respectful obeisances along with my disciples. On the first day of my sannyasa, I never thought, but I remembered that I'll have to speak in English. I remember on that sannyasa day when there was a reception, so I first of all spoke in English. So it is all arrangement of Krishna, higher authority. We are writing like this. Resolved that we, the undersigned members and devotees of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness Incorporated, in a meeting under the presidency of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, today, the 21st October, 21st of October 1968, at our Seattle branch, express our profound bereavement on hearing the passing away of His Divine Grace, Om Vishnupada Sri Srimad Bhakti Prajna Goswami Maharaja, the Sannyasa Guru, preceptor of our spiritual master, And on October 6, 1968, at his headquarters residence in Navadvipa, West Bengal, we offer our respectful obeisances at the lotus feet of Sri Srimad V.P. Keshava Goswami Maharaja with the following words composed on this occasion by our spiritual masters. These words I have already explained to you. So I wish that you all sign this and I'll send it tomorrow by email. You have got pencil? Prabhupada first signed his own name and then gave the letter to Kartikeya to take to each devotee in the room. One by one, they placed the paper on the floor and signed it. The devotee carrying the paper was about to pass by several guests, but Prabhupada said, "No, no, everyone here is present, and so they are all a witness." The last one to sign was Prabhupada's servant Kartikeya. Kartikeya put the paper on the floor and slowly signed his name, while Srila Prabhupada leaned forward on the Vyasasana, watching very intently. Before Prabhupada left Seattle, most of the devotees returned to their temples in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Only half a dozen people remained with him for the few days before his departure. Prabhupada had to go to Montreal for an interview with the US consulate there. Accepted as an immigrant in Canada, he was now trying to get permanent residency for the US. Because of the expense, he would fly to Montreal unaccompanied. He planned to stay there a few days and then fly to visit the new ISKCON Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then go back to Los Angeles. Govinda Dasi made Prabhupada his favorite food, kachoris, to take on the plane. Prabhupada had taught her how to cook them. One of the secrets was to put the kachoris into hot ghee once so that they puff up, but then cool them and recook them in the ghee. Cook them twice, he said, until it becomes reddish. As she cooked them, and while they were still hot, Prabhupada wanted to try one. When he began asking for one after another, Govindadasi said, "Prabhupada, you are going to eat them all, and you won't have any for your journey." "Never mind," he replied, "bring me more." "Never mind, my journey." According to Govindadasi, he ate 8 kachoris, and she made more for his journey. Janhavadasi. The next day, His Divine Grace was leaving for Montreal, so I was told to make the garland for him. I took too long and made it on thin thread. We were already late, but I made us even later in picking up His Divine Grace to take him to the airport. When we arrived at his apartment about 1/2 hour from the temple, uh, Harsharani ran out of the apartment and told us that she had never seen him so furious. She warned us that we were really going to get it for being late. Then Govindadasi came out and confirmed that what Harsharani said. Then Kartikeya came out, visibly shaken, followed by his divine grace. Instead of garlanding him, Upendra bowed down and, with shaking hand, held the garland above his bowed head. His divine grace simply put on the garland and, without a word of remonstration, got into the van. Naranarayana. Bilvamangala didn't know how to drive. He was swaying this way and that way. And as we were going towards the downtown area, Prabhupada said, "Who knows how to get to the airport?" We all looked at each other. Not, not one of us had ever been to the Seattle airport, and it was late for his plane. I said, "I think it is this way." Prabhupada looked at me as sharply as a razor blade and said, "Think, think means you do not know." Finally, there was an entrance onto the freeway and I stopped there. Prabhupada said, I want to take a taxi. You do not know. He said heavier things than that, which my mind has blocked out. I stopped and I said, Srila Prabhupada, let's wait a moment. Surely we will find a way. I quickly called out the window to a hitchhiker on the side of the freeway, where is the airport? And he told us how to get there. Prabhupada was angry because he not only liked to be at the airport on time, but ahead of time by at least an hour. So we got on the freeway, and this boy obviously did not know how to drive. The car was swaying and rocking back and forth like a boat in a heavy storm, and Prabhupada was looking disturbed. I was sitting in the back, and to make matters worse, every time the car swayed like that, the girls put their hands together and started chanting Tavakara Kamalavare. We drove on, and by the grace of Lord Krishna, we got to the airport half an hour ahead of the flight. Janavadasi. When we got into the airport, His Divine Grace stepped through the front doors, and immediately his knee and garland on the thin thread broke. But he simply cradled the two fallen ends in his arms and walked on with great dignity, his head held high and tilted back. Then the devotees gave me petals to throw at his feet. I thought that we would disturb the airline by leaving petals everywhere. I threw the petals clumsily because I was distracted by my doubt until His Divine Grace said, That's all right, no more petals. Then, when we sat waiting for his flight, I was pretty morose at his feet. He looked down and spoke that familiar blessing. Is everything all right? Then the devotees gave me a particularly exquisite and fragrant red rose to give to him. As he boarded the plane, he kept the rose and gave his garland to Upendra to distribute. Although I had only been a devotee for a month, still I too was faced with that unbearable separation from reciprocating with him in his physical form. His divine grace sat by the window and he waved the long stem rose slowly and then he ducked out of view while we were dancing and having ecstatic kirtana. Then he came back to the window and waved the rose and then ducked out of sight again. He did this several times and we responded each time with more forceful chanting and dancing. Then he left. October 27, 1968. Prabhupada was traveling alone when he arrived in Chicago on a morning flight from Montreal. Inside the busy terminal building of O'Hare Airport, people rushed down the corridors or looked anxiously at the airport television screens overhead to find the right gate. Prabhupada was to immediately catch a connecting flight to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Prabhupada checked the overhead television screens for his flight gate number and made his way down the crowded corridor. The rush and congestion made stopping even for a moment hazardous. As Prabhupada headed down the long corridor, passi- passers-by eyed him curiously. He came to a flight of stairs and started quickly down them, moving with the crowd. Suddenly, he tripped and lost his balance. He dropped his bag and fell down several stairs. He didn't get up. His hand was cut, and he felt pain in several places. Then a gentleman came, helped him stand, and handed him his bag. He, the stream of passengers continued to rush past while the gentleman waited, asking Prabhupada if he was all right. Prabhupada thanked the man and said that he would be able to proceed by himself. On the plane for Santa Fe, Prabhupada looked at his hand. The cut had bled a little but had now stopped, and he saw a bruise appearing. When Prabhupada arrived at the Montreal airport, a reporter had asked him, Swami, in the course of your travels, what difficulties do you encounter? And Prabhupada had replied, I have no difficulties. You have difficulties. And it was a fact. Prabhupada was simply depending on Krishna, and so he had no problems. That had also been Prahlada Maharaja's prayer. O best of the great personalities, I am not at all afraid of material existence, for wherever I stay, I am fully absorbed in thoughts of your glories and activities. My concern is only for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness and maintaining their families, societies, and countries. I am simply concerned with love for them. The reporter, however, had only written something foolish. Hush puppet high priest. A television news team with cameras and lights had come to the Seattle temple to interview Prabhupada, and that night part of the interview had been televised. It had been favorable coverage. A Christian minister, however, Mr. Miller from the University of Washington, had written in protest of Prabhupada's preaching at the university. But Prabhupada had replied that the church had failed to satisfy so many boys and girls. So, if some of them were following him and giving up sinful life, why should the Christians protest? They should be glad. At the Albuquerque airport, Harinama, president of Santa Fe Temple, and Govinda Dasi met Prabhupada, but they agreed. He, sorry, but they greeted him with strange news. Prabhupada, Govinda Dasi said, "The temple here has no money. You can't stay. You will have to go on to Los Angeles." Prabhupada turned to Harinama. Why did you ask me to come here? Harinama glanced at Govinda Dasi and then shifted his foot, which seemed to be causing him pain. He apologized and explained that the night before he had been bitten by a black widow spider, but Prabhupada's question was unanswered. So what are you going to do? Prabhupada demanded. I can't go to Los Angeles tonight. He looked from Harinama to Govinda Dasi. I must stay here in Albuquerque at least for the night in a hotel. Govinda Dasi assigned herself to calling motels to find a suitable, reasonably priced room. While she was gone, Harinama found Prabhupada a seat. Govinda Dasi said, You are not feeling well? Harinama said. Don't worry about my health, Prabhupada said. I am not a sick man. Govindadasi is sick. I am not sick. So what are you going to do? Govindadasi returned and said she couldn't find any reasonable motel. Then she began to cry. You know Krishna, Prabhupada. You know, sorry. You know Krishna, Prabhupada, she pleaded. What does Krishna want us to do? That is not the point, Prabhupada said angrily. Krishna wants to know what you want to do. Harinama, disgusted with Govinda Dasi's attitude, suddenly became decisive. I think we should go to Santa Fe, he said. Prabhupada agreed. It seemed the only thing to do. Getting into the temple Volkswagen at 4 in the afternoon, they started the 60-mile drive from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. The clouds overhead formed unusual symmetrical patterns on either side of the road. I have never seen the clouds so beautiful as today, Harinama said. An hour and a half later, as they pulled into the driveway of the little storefront building, Prabhupada noticed a handmade sign. Swamiji is coming. Yes, he said, and he smiled, his first expression of pleasure since arriving in New Mexico. You were expecting me. Coming in through the back door, Prabhupada, escorted by Harinama, entered a newly painted room. A rug partially covered the linoleum floor. A wooden table was an altar, and a mattress covered crate with a pillow was Prabhupada's seat. Prabhupada, however, chose to sit on the rug instead of the crate, and the devotees and guests sat around him. This is a nice room, Prabhupada said, looking around. I will stay here. Govindadasi brought Prabhupada a plate of cut fruit, and Prabhupada opened a lunch bag containing laddu and kachoris. About 8 guests, hippies were present, and Prabhupada distributed prasadam to everyone. One of the guests, never having tasted laddu before, remarked, "This is the best peanut butter I have ever eaten." This is the preparation, Prabhupada explained, that the mothers make for Krishna and the friends of Krishna to take with them in their lunch bag. They put this in their lunch bag when they go and play. One of the guests asked Prabhupada, "Who is Krishna?" "Krishna," Prabhupada replied, "is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is playing with the comfort boys." Prabhupada asked to spend the night in Santa Fe storefront, but the devotees told him that as the heater was too loud, he would be more comfortable staying in an apartment nearby. He complied. Harinama assigned a recently initiated boy, Toshana Krishna, to be Prabhupada's servant. When Prabhupada got to his room and found it dark, Toshana Krishna had to replace the burned out bulb in the ceiling socket. When the light came on, Prabhupada looked around the room and found it practically bare. There was a mattress on the floor but no pillow. There was no desk. So Prabhupada made his own desk by setting his books on his suitcase, a wooden chest a devotee in Seattle had built. So Prabhupada said, "Do you know how to type?" No. Prabhupada was unable to sleep that night because of the glare from the street lamp. So he sat at his desk writing purports for his verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. As he wrote, his pen scratched with a hollow sound across the wooden suitcase. Toshana Krishna took rest in another room, while Prabhupada went on writing all night, his pen scratching on the hollow wooden desk. Then, at 4 in the morning, Prabhupada rang the little bell Toshana Krishna had left with him and called Toshana Krishna. Toshana Krishna came running. "Yes, Prabhupada?" "It is 4 o'clock," Prabhupada said. "You should get up." Toshana Krishna had run to the door without his glasses, so he hurried back to get them. He then ran back again to Prabhupada's room and sat down before him. "The first thing," Prabhupada said, "is you haven't paid your obeisances." Roshana Krishna slapped his hand to his head, and Prabhupada began to chuckle. As the boy put his head to the floor in honor of his spiritual master, Prabhupada said, "That's all right. It is just for practice." Then Prabhupada spoke sternly. "Why have you brought me to Santa Fe and then told me to leave? Hmm? Roshana Krishna, a devotee for only 2 months, didn't know what to say. Prabhupada persisted. "Why is this? Why have you done this?" "Well, Govindadasi never listened to a woman." Prabhupada smiled as he spoke, but then again he sternly cautioned Toshana, "Don't laugh." "So what did she say?" "Well, she was concerned about your health because of the altitude. She had talked with some doctors and friends of hers, and she became concerned that the altitude might affect you. As a matter of fact, she was sick herself. As soon as she got here, she became sick. So she convinced Harinama that they should tell you that you shouldn't stay here. Govindadasi will always be sick. She will be sick in heaven." Prabhupada began laughing, but Toshana only looked back nervously. So they think Swamiji will come here and die. Prabhupada gestured toward the window. There are so many people living here, Toshana Krishna. It became cold in the morning, so he told me to turn on all the burners on the stove. He rubbed his head and started singing the prayers to the spiritual master. He half sang, half said them. And then, and when he was done, we both chanted Japa together. I knew I was very fortunate that he had me do little things like turn off the burner on the stove. Now you can turn one off. Now you can turn another off. It was getting warmer. Later, we went for an early morning walk. I had nothing to ask Prabhupada since I knew so little of the philosophy. He was telling me that one fortunate life begins when he meets a devotee. That night, about 40 guests came to the temple, a big increase over the usual attendance. The audience was almost entirely young couples, and Prabhupada talked about Radha and Krishna in a way that seemed most fitting. Radharani is the most beautiful girl, he said, and Krishna is the most beautiful boy. He explained that Radha and Krishna are the perfection of the conjugal relationship, and when that same conjugal relationship is exhibited by the conditioned souls in the material world, it is the only perverted reflection. After the lecture, as Prabhupada spoke casually with the guests, an elderly woman introduced herself as the head of the Albuquerque Yoga Club and invited Prabhupada to come there to speak. Prabhupada said he would be happy to come, and turning to Harinama said, "We should go. They have invited me, but they already have another engagement for you in Los Angeles," Harinama replied. So Prabhupada ended his short stay in Santa Fe after only one day.
Okay, Jai, we've come to the end of chapter 5 of this
Yes.
volume, and it is quite, I mean, as devotees noted, this particular volume of the Lilamrita gives us more closer look, more as this, yeah, it gives us a look into Prabhupada as disciples would see him in comparison to a bit of a formal presentation in the other volumes. There is a difference in the style of presentation. Although the person who's being talked about, Srila Prabhupada, is the same person, but we're getting here a more closer look, a more intimate look into Srila Prabhupada. And I was, as we were reading, I was just thinking that uh, when Prabhupada tumbles down that flight of stairs, there was a gentleman who helped him to stand up. I was just thinking, what would the destination of that person be today? Where would he be today, and what would he be doing? So that's one thought which I was thinking about as we were reading. And we see one very interesting thing about uh, Prabhupada is that every time that we see Prabhupada dealing with a Mayavadi or an opponent to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, you can never know exactly how Prabhupada would respond. Here in this particular instance, with this woman, the yogini, who was trying to disturb the young girl Joy at that time, who became later Jahanava Devi, we see how Prabhupada did not actually respond to that lady. He just ignored her question and asked devotees to just lead kirtan. Later on, he just looks at her with his fiery eyes. That's all. So it is always very interesting to see how Prabhupada deals with these kind of situations, especially when with Mayavadis. Each will get a different flavor of uh, Prabhupada. And we also saw that how when Prabhupada is explaining to Jahanava Devi, he was talking about how Krishna has wrapped his shawl about his thighs, how he has nicely put on his dhoti, so he was talking to her as if it was something that he was seeing. In fact, Jahanava Devi says that all I knew was that if I turned around to see a painting or brass or air, you know, uh, I don't know whether he was looking at a deity or a picture of Krishna or whether Lord Krishna was standing there as he looked up and down describing his form. So Prabhupada's presentation was very natural, very spontaneous, and uh, from the impression that Jana Devi had, it was clear that Prabhupada is actually seeing Krishna direct, directly. Uh, and with the Naranarayan Prabhu, that incident about how Prabhupada is concerned even about the ant, even about the ant on his table. He says that uh, our whole movement will be a success. We should give a little prasadam if we do chant Hare Krishna. You should chant Hare Krishna, and he said we should give a little prasadam. If we do that, he said our whole movement will be a success. We chant Hare Krishna to the ant, give it a little prasadam. He says our whole movement will be a success. And in the instance where Prabhupada tumbles down the stairs, I also recollect that Prabhupada, after when he reaches uh, Santa Fe, was it after he reached Santa Fe? The interviewer asks him, saw me in the course. Yes, I think uh, Montreal actually. Sorry, when he had arrived in Montreal airport earlier, before arriving in uh, Chicago and then going on to Santa Fe. He had that fall in Chicago, but before that he came from Montreal. And in Montreal, someone had asked him in the course of your travels, what difficulties do you encounter? Prabhupada replied, I have no difficulties. You have difficulties. So this is how Prabhupada always viewed the world. He lived our philosophy. Philosophy is meant for living and life is meant for preaching. That is how Prabhupada was. That he, from philosophy, he would live the philosophy and he would live his, and he would use his life for preaching. So in that particular instance, when Prabhupada said that I have no difficulties, you have difficulties, he was acting in the mood of Prahlad Maharaj, who says that I'm not afraid of material existence, but my concern is only for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness and maintaining the family, societies, and countries. I'm simply concerned with love for them. And we saw how when Bhakti Pragyana Keshav Maharaj left Prabhupada Sannyas Guru, Prabhupada actually took it very seriously how he had passed on, I mean, he had passed away, Bhakti Pragyana Keshav Maharaj, how he was very grateful to Bhakti Pragyana Keshav Maharaj for having given him sannyas. He took it that it was the order of his Guru Maharaj and he was forced to take sannyas. He gives the example of how children are fed medicine. He recollects his own childhood and he says that Bhakti Pragyan Maharaj was acting like how his mother had acted when he was young, and somehow by force he gave him sannyas, and Prabhupada composed a very beautiful verse. And the thing about it was that he considered it a very serious matter that all his disciples sign and even guests also. So, and we can see here that we also saw at that time how Prabhupada shook with emotion about that whole thing of his Guru Maharaj asking him to take sannyas because only a sannyasi can be a really, I mean, can travel around the world and preach. And, and if his voice gets choked with emotion, how his spiritual master had done it through he had done it, and Bhakti Pragyana Keshav Maharaj had acted as the instrument in that, and he was very happy, very grateful to Bhakti Pragyana Keshav Maharaj who had acted in that role. One very important thing that we need to notice is that how Jahanava Devi was very young, and she had made a big blunder by coming very late to pick up Prabhupada to go to the airport. But we noticed that Prabhupada had chastised strongly the people in his room, which Govindadasi, Harsharani, and Kartikeya, his servant. But when Janava Devi arrived, Prabhupada didn't say anything to her. He didn't say anything to her. So Prabhupada had a he knew exactly how to deal with everyone. And Jana Devi very nicely recollects how it was that Prabhupada was he would go out of sight and then again come back, and then devotee, the airport, and devotees would be very enthusiastic. Again, he would go out of sight, again, he would come back. And finally, we have this episode of Prabhupada being in Santa Fe and how Govindadasi had tried to avoid that trip of Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's very important point that Krishna wants to know what the devotees want to do. So all the Govindadasi had said, you are representative of Krishna. And so only you would know what Krishna wants us to. Prabhupada retorted very strongly. Krishna wants to know what you want to do. So, and Prabhupada is pretty strong there. He says, Govindadasi is sick. She'll be sick even in heaven. Of course, he laughs. The joke. But nevertheless, Prabhupada did not want his disciples to impose their conceptions upon him. He was his own person. And so Prabhupada did not like the fact that he was not being allowed to go and stay in Santa Fe. She was trying to just send him off to Los Angeles. So Prabhupada goes ahead and stays there. And he also admonishes Toshin Krishna for listening to Govindadasi and not permitting him or attempting not to have him in Santa Fe. Okay, so next he'll go on to Los Angeles after one day in Santa Fe. If any of you have some reflections or thoughts or questions on what we read so far, then you can do that now before we begin the next chapter. Okay, Indulekha Kripa Mataji, can go on to the next chapter. It's a beautiful title, 108 Rose Bushes.
Yes, correct. 108 Rose Bushes. October 28, 1968. On returning to Los Angeles from Santa Fe, Prabhupada found his followers in their new location on Hollywood Boulevard in the tourist section, a block from Grauman's Chinese Theater. The new temple, a former beauty parlor, occupied the large first floor of an elegant old six-story office building. The space, actually tri-level with a ground floor, a mezzanine, and a basement, was filled with more than 40 devotees. Prabhupada stayed in the Lucky Seven Hotel across the street. In the early evening, before the devotees would go out again to chant, they would crowd into Prabhupada's room and sit with him. Prabhupada had ordered that in every center his disciples perform public kirtan, and that order was sending the devotees in New York, Boston, and San Francisco to the park. In LA, the devotees were going out 12 hours a day chanting Hare Krishna in Hollywood. Prabhupada had simply asked that they go out and chant, but enthusiastic new leaders, Tamala Krishna and Vishnu Jana, were taking that order to the fullest extent. One night, Prabhupada came out in a car and parked in front of the Kirtan party, watching the chanting and dancing with pleasure. Vishnujana, who had become especially expert on the mridanga, played and led the chanting. The boys wore clean, uniform saffron dhotis, and the women saffron saris. The Malakrishna had organized the devotees almost to the point of choreography, and Prabhupada watched as devotees raised their hands and danced back and forth in the Swami step, which he himself had taught. Hundreds of tourists walked along Hollywood and Vine, going to the theaters, the wax museum, the CD bar, and the nightclubs. And although sometimes they laughed or made fun of the chanters, they were more often astonished and, at least for a moment, as they stopped in their tracks, delighted. But to Prabhupada, sitting quietly in the car, watching the devotees, the chanting was a benediction on the sleeping souls passing by. He was convinced that everyone on Hollywood Boulevard who heard the chanting was being purified of lifetimes of sinful activity. This was the power of the holy name, and the youthful disciples on the street, energetically singing to Vishnujana's beat, were also aware of this. Seeing Srila Prabhupada's car and knowing that he was watching renewed their enthusiasm. To Prabhupada, this Kirtan party was only happening by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's blessings. Surely he would be pleased to see this revolutionary phenomenon, the holy name resounding from young American Vaishnavas in the late night of this sinful city. And as Prabhupada was convinced of the blessings of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, so his young followers, knowing their spiritual master was watching them, were similarly convinced by him, and they transcended all fatigue and doubt. The devotees' residence on Hollywood Boulevard was short-lived. Their public chanting had already made them a sensation, and the arrival of the Jagannatha deities was more than the landlord had bargained for. The other tenants of the building were also disturbed, especially whenever the air conditioning system would pick up the aroma of the chili spice dal and circulate the fumes throughout the building, causing office workers to gasp and cough. The landlord served an eviction notice, and he would return the devotees for $50 on the condition that they moved themselves and all their belongings from the building that same day. The devotees had no choice. They put everything, stove, furniture, rugs, pots and pans, soap, sticks, teas, even Lord Jagannatha out on the sidewalk. They had nowhere to go, while the women and children waited for hours amid the paraphernalia on the street. Some other devotees managed to rent enough warehouse space for the furniture. Gradually, the devotees relocated in various places. An elderly English lady allowed a few devotees to stay at her house. The brahmacharis found a small house in the Watts area, and a few women went to another place. Dayananda, who had a job and his own apartment, took a few married couples at his place and found an apartment for Prabhupada, Lord Jagannatha, and Kar- Kartamishana on Haysworth Street. Thus, the devotees of the Los Angeles temple became scattered. Despite the odd circumstances, they still came together every day for chanting, either on Hollywood Boulevard or in some other Los Angeles area. Prabhupada began visiting the brahmacharis at their house where he had regular Monday, Wednesday, and Friday lectures. He would lead Kirtana, often masterfully playing the mridanga, and his playing would make everyone dance. Nandarani had arranged for Prabhupada to lecture at the Hollywood Vegetarian Society. Do they want to hear about Bhagavad Gita? Prabhupada asked. No, Nandarani replied. They only want to hear about being vegetarian. You tell them Swamiji doesn't know anything about being vegetarian. Tell them I don't know anything. But if they want to learn about Bhagavad Gita, I know something. Nandarani called the Vegetarian Society and asked if they wanted to hear about Bhagavad Gita. They did. Prabhupada said, and what? And we aren't interested in lecturing at mundane programs. Even the pigeons are vegetarians. We don't want to be pigeons. We don't care for vegetarian or non-vegetarian. We only care if we can offer it to Krishna. Then we eat it. When a reporter from the Cosmic Star came, Prabhupada talked frankly with him about bogus swamis and avatars from India. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times interviewed Prabhupada on whether he thought man could land on the moon. Prabhupada told the reporter to note down that the Krishna consciousness movement has nothing to do with going to the moon. The reporter had his own angle, and he printed an article in the December 28 issue of the LA Times. Swami says people are living on moon. If astronauts land on the moon, they probably will be opposed by highly intelligent beings who have been there for 10,000 years. So says A.C. Bhaktivedanta, spiritual leader of an attention getting Indian cult that has grown from a few followers 2.5 years ago to groups of initiators to in 10 US and Canadian cities. The 72-year-old guru interviewed Friday at the Los Angeles Temple of the International Society of Krishna for Krishna Consciousness, 1975, La Cienega Boulevard, believes first of all that there is only a remote chance that man could land on the moon planet, claiming that his statements were based on Vedic literature, specifically the Srimad Bhagavatam. Swami Bhaktivedanta said present spacesuits would have to be improved. Matter of body. To land there, you must have the specific body, he said. With this body, you cannot go there. You have to change it scientifically, spiritually, or otherwise. Granting that an astronomer's spacesuit might provide the right body, the Swami nevertheless maintained that the present spacesuits used by the astronauts are not adequate. The Bhagavad Gita, another holy Vedic book, describes lower, middle, and upper planetary systems. He said, the Earth is in the middle and has beings of average intelligence. The Moon is in the upper category and contains highly intelligent beings, mainly because they have been living so many years. With this body, neither can you land there nor can you interfere in their business, said Swami. But if astronauts were successful in landing on the moon, he said he expects the moon beings to oppose the earthlings. Citing an analogy in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he said one king wanted to enter the heavenly kingdom and was opposed by the demigods. The Guru also indicated that any advanced civilization would not take kindly to dumb visitors from another planet. Would astronauts or cosmonauts be able to see the moon beings? Almost invisible. They would be almost invisible, he replied. Ho- Howard Wheeler, an Ohio State instructor of English and a disciple who sat in for the interview, helped the Swami here by suggesting that the moon beings might have subtle forms which would not be perceived by Earth residents. The Swami saw no difficulties arising in the Krishna consciousness movement if astronauts make a successful landing and return with nothing untoward happening. The movement, sometimes called the Hare Krishna movement, because of the importance of the chant using the words Hare Krishna and Ram, has drawn its early growth from the recent interest in transcendental meditation. Weeks went by. No one was able to find a new temple. The meetings in the Brahmachari apartment were confined, and the neighbors complained about the kirtana and the mridanga playing. But often, while the devotees were out chanting downtown, they would meet someone who would allow them to use his garage for an evening, thus providing an opportunity for all the devotees to be together with Prabhupada. Srimati Dasi. Kamalakrishna met a woman on Sankirtana who offered her garage for Srila Prabhupada to lecture in. It was in a nice neighborhood with a clean double garage. We cleaned it even more. We put up madrasas on the wall, pictures over that, a large altar on one side and a Vyasasana for Srila Prabhupada in the back. It was cold out. We kept the large double doors closed so we could heat the place and fill the air with incense, expecting Srila Prabhupada to arrive soon. Many neighbors and devotees filled the garage. Gopala waited out front to give a blast on the conch shell as Srila Prabhupada arrived. We heard the conch shell and opened the garage door. As it raised from the bottom and swung slowly up to the ceiling, Srila Prabhupada stood there, small and dignified, waiting to enter. He walked in majestically, took his seat on his Vyasasana, and began a kirtana. His lecture struck the curiosity of many neighborhood guests. They all went home with the magazines, prasadam, and a new experience to relate to their friends. Thus, Srila Prabhupada's preaching was going on. One night, while speaking at a garage meeting, Prabhupada described explicitly Krishna's abode, where houses are made of Chintamani stone and the trees are all desired trees. The inhabitants there, as well as the land and trees, all have spiritual forms and are full of bliss and knowledge. There, everyone serves Krishna and Krishna reciprocates. On another night, Prabhupada spoke about the song Hari Hari Viphale by Narottama Das Thakur. In this song, Prabhupada explained the author is lamenting his disqualifications and is begging for Krishna's mercy. Narottama Das Thakur laments that instead of worshipping Radha and Krishna, he has simply wasted his life in sense gratification. Prabhupada would often speak about Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtana movement of chanting the holy name as the antidote.
Indulekha Mataji, we can no longer hear you.
Okay, Prabhuji. Can you hear me now, Prabhu? Because I didn't. Hare Krishna?
Better, but not like before.
I don't know, Prabhuji, because. Okay, can you hear me now, Prabhu?
Yeah.
Okay, so from where should I continue again, Prabhuji? Means
On
to repeat
another
again.
night, Prabhupada spoke about this song.
Yes, okay, Prabhuji. Sorry, Prabhu. Sorry for the disturbance. On another night, Prabhupada spoke about the song Hari Hari Viphale by Narottama Dasa Thakura. In this song, Prabhupada explained the author is lamenting his disqualifications and is begging for Krishna's mercy. Narottama Das Thakura laments that instead of worshipping Radha and Krishna, he has simply wasted his life in sense gratification. Prabhupada would often speak about Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtana movement of chanting the holy names as antidote for the ills of Kali Yuga. The devotees always had questions. Madhudvisha asked how a brahmachari can channel his such desire in serving Krishna. Vishnujana asked whether the spiritual master's mercy was the source of the bliss he was feeling. Tamala Krishna asked how Krishna could be both the father of everyone and the son of his devotee. And there were questions about what it was like to be a cow or tree in Krishna Loka, and whether the soul's rasa or serving relationship with Krishna could ever be changed. And Prabhupada would answer these questions at length. But rarely would Prabhupada complain that there was no temple. Rather, he would say, never mind that we have no place, we have no temple. Krishna has provided this garage, so we accept it. Although homeless in Los Angeles, the devotee's basic ingredient for devotional life remained intact. It was not uncommon by Indian standards, Prabhupada explained, for one's living situation to be unsettled. In India, he said, as many as 20 people might keep their belongings in a single room. They would come and go, taking whatever they needed from the room while living outside, sleeping next to the road. But in America, of course, such a life was impossible, and garage meetings would attract few people. On November 28th, Prabhupada wrote in a letter, so far as it goes in Los Angeles, everything is going very nicely with the Sankirtan party, and soon we are expected to have a new temple location. When Prabhupada met the devotees in the evening, he would ask them, how many magazines did you distribute? How much money did you collect? By their good results and Prabhupada's pleasure, a feeling of high spirits prevailed. But one night, when they came to visit him in his apartment, Prabhupada's mood was different. He seemed intolerant. A complacency had set in among the devotees. How long do you expect me to sit in this house? He demanded of Dayananda. And then he turned indignantly from one devotee to another. What are you doing? The deities are in my apartment and you are all here. What are you doing? He looked at Naranarayana. What have you done today to find a temple? Well, Prabhupada, I was, but without fully hearing Naranarayana's reply or excuse, Prabhupada turned to Tamala Krishna. And you? Did you find a temple? And one after another, he pinned down each devotee in the room. And what did you do? The devotees felt Prabhupada's anger. I want a temple. Los Angeles must have a temple. There must be a place to worship the deity. That night, he didn't lecture. 3 days later, the devotees found a new temple, a one-story church with three large rooms. The first really nice piece of property the International Society for Krishna Consciousness had ever acquired. The church had been used by a Japanese Baptist congregation and was located at La Cienega Boulevard in the middle of Los Angeles, in a neighborhood of brick buildings, stores, factories, and businesses. The wooden church stood on a little patch of grass. The rent was high, $500 a month, more than Prabhupada had ever paid for a piece of property. Although Prabhupada had acted non-committal when the landlord had shown him the place, afterward he told the devotees he wanted the place and they should get it. Dayananda questioned the high rent, but Prabhupada said they had waited long enough. Here was a good place, so they should get it. For Prabhupada, this new temple marked the beginning of a new era for the Krishna consciousness movement. He wrote Kirtanananda Swami on December 8th. You will be glad to know that we have signed a lease for the new temple for Los Angeles Center. It's a very large, fine chapel, and now there is a program being organized here to set up everything very nicely and invite many new people to participate in our program. Krishna has been very kind to grant us such facilities, and now there are many efforts to be made to use it nicely. The rent is very high, but if we can maintain this establishment, it will surely have great future prospects. The devotees in New York had also acquired a new building, moving from 26 Second Avenue to a larger storefront 2 blocks up on the Second Avenue. I do not know how is your temple there. Prabhupada wrote Brahmananda in New York. I have heard that it is very nice, but I think that the temple here is probably nicer. All devotees in other places, Prabhupada said, should consider the new standard reached in Los Angeles. To Krishnadasa in Germany, Prabhupada wrote, "You will be glad to learn that we are having very good success in improving our temples here and have acquired an excellent large chapel suitable for living quarters and kirtanas." And he wrote to Jadurani in Boston that for his large meeting hall, he would need large paintings to decorate the hall. On morning into the temple, the devotees called a press conference. They cooked a feast for 100 people, rented chairs, but only one reporter came. The lone reporter pointed out their mistake in holding a press conference in the evenings after normal working hours. Prabhupada spoke and then encouraged the assembled devotees to take the feast themselves. In Krishna, in Krishna consciousness, there is never any failure. If people come to the program, we preach, and if not, we take prasad. The devotees made plans for big Sunday festivals with the puppet shows and theater performances. Bhavananda, a new devotee and former New York textile designer, decorated and painted the temple with bright colors: pinks, purples, reds, blues, greens, and bright yellows. From their kirtanas on the street, the Sankirtana devotees began regularly bringing guests to visit new temple. The devotees planted 108 rose bushes on Prabhupada's request throughout the temple grounds. Within a short time, an altar was ready, and the devotees brought Lord Jagannatha and Kartan, Kartaneshana. Now we will begin full-scale deity worship, Prabhupada said to some of the women. He talked of beginning something new in ISKCON, the daily offerings of prasadam to the deity and daily arati. As the Los Angeles devotee community grew and proposed in their sorry prospered in their new setting, Prabhupada gradually relinquished the management to his leading disciples. Even for outside speaking engagements, which were often late, disrupting Prabhupada's normal schedule, he sent his disciples in his stead. He wanted to spend his time writing books at his apartment. He said he would go to the temple 3 nights a week and to the festival on Sundays, but otherwise he would be inaccessible. Only his servant and Tamala Krishna, with his daily reports on the Sankirtana party, would see him in his apartment. By
Okay,
December
you can
9th,
stop there. You can
yes,
stop there.
yes, sir.
Next, we start about the book printing and publication. I mean, book working on the books. So we'll start that in the next uh, the next session that we have. One thing that we notice here is that Prabhupada is very satisfied with whatever arrangement that Krishna provides. But Prabhupada is never satisfied if devotees become complacent or lazy. Like as it happened that devotees took it for granted. Okay, somehow in the future, some temple. But didn't want devotees to have that attitude. He wanted that devotees work hard. Yes, whatever we have, we are satisfied currently with Krishna's mercy. But we are not satisfied with being complacent, or that is not the point. We should be working hard. We cannot be complacent or lazy about what we need to do. So that was the reason that Prabhupada actually yelled at the devotees there. We saw how uh, um, Prabhupada is upset when devotees were not making some, just in the name of leaving it to Krishna, they were not making any efforts to find a new find a place for a new temple. And we also saw how Prabhupada, in his interview with the reporters, Prabhupada says that you need to have a sufficient you need to have a suitable body in order to be able to go to the moon planet. So Prabhupada is not willing to accept that it is just like going to one another place in the world. No, it's a different planet. Different planets have different conditions and different requirements. So unless we meet that requirement and they're able to live in those conditions, we won't be permitted there. So Prabhupada gives a very simple example sometimes of the immigration department and how uh, immigration department does not allow someone to come into the country. They check. So then he said, don't you think that these higher planter system, they would have some form of immigration where they would not permit, where they would disallow unqualified, uh, unqualified aliens, as they say, to enter the planet? No, they would not. I mean, they would not allow. They would not allow. They would have some system. So Prabhupada used a lot of common sense arguments, but basically his argument is coming from his faith in Vedic scripture that the moon is a higher planetary system, and as such, ordinary beings cannot go there. And it is interesting how in Los Angeles, devotees would go on Sankirtan for 12 hours a day. Kirtaniya Sada Hari. And Prabhupada, this one singing one night is Hari Hari Bipale. Once in a different, and I mean, it's a different instance where Prabhupada is asked, which is your most favorite song? And he immediately said, Hari Hari Bipale. This is very dear to Prabhupada, this particular song. Okay, so any thoughts or reflections, question? Looks like all of you are very immersed in Srila Prabhupada Leela.
Yes, Prabhu, I
The
didn't
impact
see
of,
the time also.
the impact
I
of what we read today is overwhelming everyone. Yes.
Yes, Prabhuji, I was reading. I didn't see the time or anything. I was just going on reading, and I was really enjoying that relishing those
You
things,
became like
Prabhuji.
Shukadeva Goswami.
No, Prabhuji, no, Prabhuji. And I'm not that qualified. Just I was really relishing the pastimes. Like really, it was very nice. I didn't even see the time. I thought, oh, it's time already. I thought when you asked me to stop for today.
I think that today I also didn't notice the time pass. I mean, somehow the section was very, very absorbing. And when I noticed it, suddenly, oh, it's time.
Just when you only just stopped me, then only I saw the time. Yeah, it's time. So
Okay, so if we have, yesterday was the incorporation day of ISKCON. And we have a big month coming up now in August with Balram Purnima, Janmashtami, and then after that we have Radhashtami.
I think
So
Prabhuji now the yes Prabhupada Connect Day is happening now, Prabhuji in Mayapur now. It's going on, Prabhuji.
yeah, it's yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, then. So we close for today and we will resume again next Sunday.